What is going on, guys? So one of the stories to come out of the trade deadline was the fact that Phil Kessel did not sign with the Vancouver Canucks, effectively probably ending his NHL career. I don't think that he's going to get picked up next season. And as a result, I posed the question whether or not Phil Kessel is a Hall of Famer. And spoiler alert, for me, it's a no. But it kind of got me thinking, what other players would be Hall of Famers if their career were to end right now? So I decided to make a list of some of the guys that are in between. I'm going to first off show you the guys that are like no doubt locks, the Crosbys, the Ovechkins of the world. But then we're going to go through 13 guys that I have listed right here that I think you could make a strong argument for either way. I'm going to tell you whether I think if they retired right now, whether or not they'd be a Hall of Famer. When looking at the Hall of Fame, I think obviously regular season is more important than the playoffs. Playoffs is more of an additive because everybody gets to play in the regular season. It's a team sport. Some people are in far better situations to succeed. So playoffs, you could add to your resume, but it doesn't absolutely define you. I'm not going to have obviously he has retired, but I don't think Justin Williams is a Hall of Famer. His playoff resume is insane, but just not a Hall of Famer in terms of regular season. So in terms of that, I also value prime far more than just longevity. When looking at your best 4, 5, 6 year stretch, if you were a top 10 player in the entire NHL, that's going to do far more for me than you being a pretty good player late into your 30s. So prime and obviously regular season is mainly what I go off of. So first off, here are the guys that I think are like locks. Obviously, this is in no order: Crosby, Ovi, Malkin, Kane, Carlson, Hedman, Kucherov, Stamkos, Vasilevsky, Fleury. It's a pretty controversial one, but he is the second most wins of all time. Letang, I think, would be because of the team success. They'd put him in. Burns, Doughty, Kopitar, McDavid. McDavid's easily, yes. And Quick, and then McKinnon. I think McKinnon, once he won the Stanley Cup, and especially considering this year, he's probably be a Hart finalist, even if he'd be top 4, even if he does retire right now. He'd also be a Hall of Famer. So those are 17 guys that I think are absolute locks. Absolute locks. If they retired today, they would be Hall of Famers. So first guy, let's just run through it again. Phil Kessel, I made a whole video on this, but I don't think Phil Kessel is good enough to be a Hall of Famer. His peak just wasn't good enough in terms of the fact that he only broke 85 points once in his career, never got to the 40 goal mark, I believe. So when looking at him, 992 career points, I also don't think that's enough for a forward. You need to get over that 1,000-point mark like the guys I'm going to list later. The Cups definitely add to his legacy, especially considering he probably should have won the Conn Smythe for, I believe, 2016? Or I don't know, one of the Penguins runs. I think it was 2016. But when looking at it, I don't think that the playoff success, especially considering he was the 4th or 5th best player on those teams, make up for the fact, well, he was very good that one year. But overall, in terms of just overall players, the 4th or 5th best. In the Iron Man streak, I don't think that makes up for a lack of the overall prime that he lacks and overall longevity stats that he does rack. I could see an argument, and I'd honestly be happy if he did get in, but Phil Kessel right now is a no for me. Next up, Sergei Bobrovsky is a yes, and especially a resounding yes after the most recent playoff run. Before the playoff run, I could see an argument both ways. After he dragged the Florida Panthers to the Stanley Cup final, I think goalies' playoff success actually does matter more than skaters because you have far more control over how far your team goes, as well as the fact that this year he's having a massive bounce back year. He might be a Vezina finalist, probably going to finish top 5. And when looking at him overall, he has 2 Vezinas. He hasn't finished top 8 besides those 2 Vezina wins, so that's kind of a knock against him. But he has 2 Vezinas. He has 392 wins right now, 14th all time. So 14th most wins of all time, as well as 2 Vezinas. I think that makes it a pretty easy yes for a guy like Sergei Bobrovsky. Next up, Claude Giroux. Similarly to some of the guys I'm going to list later, Giroux's a pretty interesting one because his prime is not quite Hall of Fame level. Yes, he did have 2 Hart 4th place finishes, which is very impressive. His best seasons were a 93-point season and 77 points and 102.7. His prime is roughly Hall of Fame level, maybe just slightly slacking. I think he will get in eventually because he has been such an elite player, especially late in his career. But right now, I do think he is a no, considering he also has 1,056 points. I think after another 2 to 3 years of 60 to 70 point play, or even if that goes down, I think once he gets to 1,150, 1,200 career points, then I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer. But if he retired right now, no Stanley Cups, never a finalist for any major award, I just can't see it in terms of a Hall of Famer right now, but I think Claude Giroux in 3 to 4 years will have that Hall of Fame resume. Next up, Alex Petrangelo. Alex Petrangelo is also a no for me in similar reasons. Yes, he does have those 2 Stanley Cups, which do help him out a ton. He was a good top 10 defenseman for 10 years from like 2012 to like 2021. But when looking at it, I never thought that he never really had that top 3 defenseman season or even like a top 5 one. He was never a Norris finalist one time in his career. I think that does matter that he's never really sniffed a Norris. So I think eventually, similarly to a Drew, especially because he has the cups, if he continues to play at a high level late into his 30s, he'll have a very strong argument with the team success, 2 different teams, as well as being this very good defenseman. But right now, I do think that he is just a Hall of very good player that was lucky to be on 2 very, very good teams. But I think when it's all said and done, he's definitely going to have an argument. Roman Josi, I go with a yes, because unlike Petrangelo, he has had those high-end seasons. A well-deserved Norris win back in 2020, and although I didn't have him winning in 2022, you cannot deny that he had a fantastic 96-point season. One of the closest Norris losses ever. He lost by 1.3% of the vote. So he arguably could have had 2 Norrises in his career. Definitely has that one Norris, as well as the fact since 2015, he's pretty easily been a top 10 defenseman in top 5 in a couple of those years, multiple, probably like 3, 4, maybe even 5 of those years. When looking at it, especially in the back half of his career, he's been fantastic. The last 5 years, he has 316 points in 333 games. Again, that was in his 30s. That wasn't even in his 20s, where he's also very good. And even right now, he's still a top 10 defenseman in the entire NHL, arguably going to be a top 5 in the Norris this year with 63 points in 66 games. So the fact that he's still playing at an extremely high level, as well as having a decent career stats, as well as being an elite player still, I think that he is a Hall of Famer right now. I would have Roman Josi in. This year probably solidified it completely, considering another point per game season at goddamn 34 years old is absolutely insane. Austin Matthews. I'm going to go yes. First off, if he retired right now, he's probably still going to win the Rocket Trophy. When looking at it, he's 8 up on Sam Reinhart, who has 16 games left. So Reinhart would need 9 to win the goddamn Rocket. But even if he doesn't, in my opinion, which again, he easily is, I think that he would be a Hall of Famer. When you look at his 5-year peak, he won the Hart, 2 Rockets. This year, let's say that he wins it, but even if he doesn't, he has 2 other Rocket second place finishes. Only one down year was when he had 40 goals and 74 points. So when looking at a prime, he was no doubt top 5 player over those 5 years. Besides that one kind of down year, he was arguably a top 3 player in every single season. So when looking at Austin Matthews, already has 622 points, which isn't as impressive as the guys that I'm going to list, but it isn't a small amount, especially given that time. So I think considering he is the best goal scorer in era adjusted the last 5 years, it's one of the best goal scoring reigns of all time. I think you cannot deny arguably top 3 goal scorer of all time based on his career. He's ahead of Ovechkin at the same age. I would have Austin Matthews in the Hall of Fame right now, just considering how good his prime has been. It far outweighs these guys I'm going to talk about later that have far more points, 300, 400 more points, but they were never the player that Austin Matthews was in his prime. Austin Matthews, I would go with yes right now. Next up, Conor Hellebuyck, similarly to an Austin Matthews, I'm going to go with no, just because he hasn't won that second Vezina yet. Meanwhile, Matthews has the Hart and 2 Rockets on top of that, as well as probably winning the Rocket this year. Hellebuyck's a no right now. If he does win that Vezina, I think it's probably like a 50-50. Not quite there in terms of the longevity stats, only 268 wins, which puts him 57th overall. He's going to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. After he wins the Vezina this year and even puts up 1-2 more good top 5, top 6 seasons, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, no doubt. Conor Hellebuyck is going to go down, in my opinion, probably as a top 15 goalie of all time. Right now, pre-Vezina win, pre-second Vezina win, I would personally lean no, but easily going to be Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. Cale Makar, this might be the hardest one in the entire thing, because again, Matthews played for like 3 or 4 more seasons than a Cale Makar, where he was, again, one of the best goal scorers in the entire NHL from 2017 to 2019 before he was 1 goal shy of the Rocket. He was an elite player. Cale Makar only has 5 and 3/4 of a season. But I am going to go yes. When you look at Cale Makar, since 2021, he has been the consensus best defenseman in the entire NHL. I think that does matter. He's going to be a Norris finalist for his 4th straight year. When looking at it, even if he retired today, he'd probably end up being a Norris finalist, considering last year he had 66 points in 60 games, was a Norris finalist. This year, 71 and 61. When looking at it, what he's done at the start of his career is, I mean, obviously Bobby Orr's next level, but it's arguably like the second most impressive start to an NHL career for a defenseman. So when looking at it, I think the prime is that insane. And although Matthews has done it for longer, the playoff success for Cale Makar, having that Conn Smythe, one of the greatest defenseman runs in a playoff run ever, with 29 points in 21 games, winning himself the Conn Smythe in the Cup, I would go with Cale Makar, just because that prime for a defenseman is like top 5 of all time. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. So yes, I'm going to go Hall of Fame if you retired today for Cale Makar, as crazy as that is to say. Next up, Joe Pavelski. Similarly to a Claude Giroux, I'm going to go with a no right now. Similarly to Claude Giroux, he only has 2 more points than Claude Giroux, 1,058 and 1,317 games. His 3-year peak in the mid-2010s is probably Hall of Fame level. He put up around 39 goal, 37 assists, 76-point pace for between 2014 to 2016, which nowadays would equate probably to like 45 and 45-ish pace. So that is Hall of Fame in my opinion, but it only was 3 years. I look at like a 5 or 6 year prime. He wasn't consistent throughout his prime, being a top 15, top 20 player in the entire NHL. I think he's going to get there similarly to a Giroux, considering he's still so good and has been so good of late. Once he gets to 1,150 points, I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer. But right now, his case kind of relies on that longevity, and considering he doesn't have the full longevity stats yet, I think we got to wait a couple of years before we say Pavelski is a no doubt Hall of Famer. Leon Draisaitl. Yes. I feel like if I have Austin Matthews, I gotta have Leon Draisaitl. He has that heart, which is so massive. If he didn't have that heart trophy, say McDavid doesn't get hurt, he probably doesn't win it. Maybe even Nathan MacKinnon wins it. So that heart trophy is so massive for a guy like Draisaitl. Really differentiated himself. Besides being McDavid's sidekick, the fact that he got a Hart Trophy for himself really just solidified himself. And over the last 5 years, he has 619 points and 400 and the last 6 seasons, my bad. He has 619 points in 432 games, which is 50 goal, 67 assist, 117 point pace. That is absolutely insane. That is no doubt a Hall of Fame peak, even though for some of that, he did play on the same line as Connor McDavid. Hart Trophy already 826 points. Not quite as much as a Giroux or Pavelski, but given how much better his prime was and the fact that he has a Hart Trophy, I think Leon Draisaitl, if he retired today, would be a Hall of Famer. Brad Marchand, I'm also going to go with yes, because although he does have 130 less points than a Giroux and a Pavelski, I think his prime was better, and the fact that he does have a Stanley Cup, although he wasn't a top 5 player probably on that Stanley Cup team, that still does add to his legacy. Over his 6-year prime, again, I'm talking about 6-5, 4, 5, 6-year primes is what I care about. He averaged 39 goals, 61 assists, and 100 points. This was from, I believe, 2017 to 2022. And in that stretch, he was first team All-NHL 2 times, second team All-NHL 2 times, and he was arguably the best or second best left wing in the entire NHL, splitting that with Alexander Ovechkin. He was a far better defensive player, and he was the best player on those Boston Bruins teams for multiple years. When looking at it, he finished during that stretch, 5 of those years, he finished 7th, 11th, 5th, 9th, 5th in Hart Trophy. So people were deeming him as a legit top 15 player for basically that entire 5-6 year stretch. So when looking at it, although he doesn't have quite the longevity because he had not a rough start, but he wasn't a high impact player right out of the gate, I think his play from 2017 on is better than the prime of a Pavelski, of a Giroux, and with that Stanley Cup, I would go Brad Marchand for a Hall of Famer, and I think he is going to be a Hall of Famer, especially he's still playing at a high level. After another 2 to 3 years of this, once he gets to 1,100 career points, it really should be without a doubt that Brad Marchand is going to be a Hall of Famer. Corey Perry, I use this picture for a very important reason because his Hall of Fame case solely relies on the Hart Trophy that he won and the Rocket Trophy that he won back in 2011, considering he only has 899 career points. He was not as consistent as a Claude Giroux or a Pavelski, but I do think that Hart Trophy, Rocket Trophy is so goddamn massive. That is the hardest things to win in the NHL when looking at leading the NHL in goals and being the most valuable player in the entire NHL. So I am going to go with a yes for Corey Perry. He's still a solid player. Again, not as good as, Giroux's younger by a decent margin, and Pavelski, I think, might be the same age. He's not as good as them now, but he's still a solid player. Considering he's going to be 39 in 2 months, the fact that he's still like a third liner on a contender is pretty impressive in terms of longevity. So when looking at him, he also has a Stanley Cup compared to a Claude Giroux or a Pavelski, where he was a pretty important piece. So I would go Corey Perry, but again, I just put so much significance on a Hart Trophy, Rocket Trophy. A Taylor Hall was not as good as a Corey Perry over 3 to 4 years. I know there's going to be the comments, is Taylor Hall going to be Hall of Famer? No, I don't think so. Corey Perry over other years he didn't win another Rocket, but he got close. He had 42 goals one season, 39. Like, he was a stud. He was a top 25 player for like 3 to 4 to 5 years with Ryan Getzlaf. So he had a solid overall prime. It wasn't as long, it wasn't as consistent as a Giroux or a Pavelski, but still, I'm going to give him the nod. He's a yes. And then lastly, Nicklas Backstrom, which is a really weird one. A year ago, 2 years ago, I would have said pretty easily yes. But the fact that he's basically hung up the skates from this hip injury, he finishes with 1,033 points, and 762 of those are assists. I think I'm a no now when looking at how guys, like I mentioned them 9,000 times at this point, like a Pavelski, like a Giroux, the fact they're playing into their mid to late 30s at such a high level, racking up points, going to finish well ahead of a Backstrom. I think the Hall of Fame should rise with the standards of the guys playing. So when looking at it, the fact Backstrom just got to 1,000 points and now has hung it up, the fact he had a very good prime, probably arguably a Hall of Fame prime, the one like 102 point season, but he also did play with the greatest goal scorer of all time. I am a no from Backstrom, but he definitely would have made it if this hip injury never happened. He would have cruised at probably 1,200 career points. It would have been no doubt. So when looking at it, the fact that he never won a major award, he does have a Stanley Cup, but the fact he never won, never really came that close to a major award, came kind of close to the Ross one season. But I am going to be a no, considering those longevity stats really aren't there. So I'm a no from Nicklas Backstrom. So to review, Kessel, no. Bobrovsky, yes. Giroux, no, but will be. Petrangelo, no, might be. Josi, yes, definitely will be. Matthews, yes, definitely will be. Hellebuyck, no, but will end up being a Hall of Famer. Makar, yes, a soft yes, but obviously like another year from now, it's going to be a no doubt lock. Pavelski, no, probably after another 2 to 3 years. Draisaitl, yes, definitely. Marchand, yes, 2 to 3 years, definitely. Perry, slight yes, and then Backstrom gets a slight no. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Which of these guys do you think will be no doubt Hall of Famers if they retired right now in 2 to 3 years? I want to hear from you guys. This is a very controversial topic, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.